everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Bold Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Brandon Busteed, President of University Partners and Global Head of Learn Work Innovation at Kaplan. And I'm thrilled to have with us today Seth Bodnar, the President of the University of Montana. Seth and I have had a chance to get to know each other over the last year. We've bonded over conversations about work readiness and career services and triple threat graduates and a number of other things. But Seth, before we dive into the conversation we're planning to have today, I would love you to just share a little bit about your own personal and professional background. You've got a very unusual background for a college president that I think our viewers would love to hear more about. And then just tell us a little bit more about University of Montana as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. It's great to be here. Honored to spend some time with you. I obviously have really enjoyed our conversations talking about higher ed in general, and in particular, how we're best preparing students to succeed in a really dynamic global marketplace that our students are participating in. And yeah, you're right. I have I joined the university in 2018 with a non-traditional background. I was formerly a military officer in the U.S. Army Special Forces. Taught economics on faculty at West Point. Loved higher education, but rather than pursuing the full faculty career path, I actually went and spent some time leading in the business world. Worked at GE and was the chief digital officer of GE Transportation, leading a software business that was basically automating the global rail industry, and then eventually had the opportunity to make my way back to higher ed here at the University of Montana, and couldn't be happier to be here. Just a beautiful place here in Missoula, Montana. It's a beautiful March day here, sunny outside, and we're the state's flagship research institution here. Approximately about 10,000 students. Vibrant programs across all disciplines, strong liberal arts foundation, but great programs across the sciences, health professions, business, technology, as well as a thriving graduate programs and a growing research enterprise. In fact, sixth fastest growing research institution in the country right now. So just a great university and a very vibrant setting. We're looking forward to having you out here to visit us sometime soon too.
Well, I'm excited to be out there, and we should also talk briefly about what you guys set up during the pandemic for students, because it sounds like a great thing. Apparently there's you guys put up a new ice rink out in the main area with fire pit. Just tell us a little bit more about that. It sounds like a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, we've had, it's like every institution had to really adapt and do so quickly throughout this pandemic. I mean, for us, it's our priority has been, how do we enable our students to keep on learning, while ensuring the health and safety of the UM family, our faculty, staff, and students. And we were able to have some in-person learning options this fall. We set up a number of outdoor classrooms across our campus, social distancing measures across, and actually as the winter weather approached, one of the big concerns we had as students came back for the spring is, geez, how do we? We're rightfully, like many colleges and universities, concerned with the mental health impacts of this pandemic, and how do we provide those engagement opportunities for our students, that vibrant campus experience, and the ingenuity of our team throughout this has been tremendous. And one of the things we've really enjoyed, we actually, outside of Main Hall on the Oval, we set up an ice skating rink this winter with fire pits around it. And in fact, today we have it's actually a day where we gave students a break from classes, and we have an employee wellness day that's happening, and our employees are around those fire pits right now. It's a little bit warmer, but I think some people are using that ice skating rink still, and just been a great story. In fact, we had a couple of students this year who actually were performers on Disney on Ice, and those two students went out there and put on what was an amazing show. We actually have video of it. Terrifying, some of the things they're doing on this ice skating rink, but really, it's just one example of the ways that we, and like many other institutions, have had to adapt in what's been a really challenging year, but also an inspiring year too, in the way that our communities come together.
Yeah, very, very cool example though. So thanks for sharing. I can see the backdrop across the idyllic mountains behind campus, and anyway, I'm sure people have enjoyed that. So,
Yeah, it's pretty
you know,
special.
we're talking today about blending the liberal arts and professional skills, and I want to talk about what you guys are doing and how you've been thinking about this at University of Montana. But as we were leading up to our chat, you and I started talking about the military. Obviously, you went to West Point. And I thought we had a little interesting exchange there that I'd like to ask you about, right? You had mentioned that the liberal arts is something that West Point is investing a lot in, right? Where, some people might be like, wait a minute, this is the US Military Academy. Like, what's up with that? And then you were also talking about through the lens of how important that liberal arts type of mentality is within special forces. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we all are influenced by our own experiences, and yeah, as you noted, I went to West Point, and as you shared, I mean, that from the outside seems like about as vocational and technical as one might get. Really strong engineering school focused on building professional military officers, and it does have that, right? When I was there, every student, in addition to their major, if they're not an engineering major, has to at least have a track, similar to a minor in engineering. So I majored in economics with a mechanical engineering track. And cadets during their off time between semesters, they're out doing vocational training, with military units. They're attending airborne school, learning how to jump out of airplanes, learning specific skills, and that makes sense. But at the same time, West Point has become what many would characterize as really a model for a liberal arts college, in the way that every cadet receives a broad education in the humanities as well. In fact, Drew Faust, the former president of Harvard, gave a really interesting speech at West Point in 2016, where she noted that at a time when many institutions around the country were dropping liberal arts requirements, West Point was actually adding them. And she spoke about the important role that the humanities play in shaping these future leaders, and in terms of the perspective that they provide for leaders, the historical and cultural lenses through which to assess a social, the empathy that's necessary to see life through another person's eyes. Second, the way that the leaders need to improvise. Education is not the same as training for a job, because circumstances evolve. And as well, the importance of communication, the ability to use persuasive language. And frankly, my experience as a cadet, as a member of the faculty at West Point, as a special forces officer, and then as a business leader, those words all ring true. I studied history as a graduate student at Oxford. I led a special forces team. I also led a software business with almost $500 million of revenue. And so I think President Faust is spot on. And we see that in special forces. One of the things special forces selects for is people who are able to deal in ambiguity. And frankly, I think that's what we need to train our students and equip our students with, that ability to navigate uncertainty and to succeed through a constantly changing environment.
Yeah. Well, I love the example, and it's a great segue into how you're thinking about things at University of Montana. As you mentioned, state flagship, strong grounding in the liberal arts. You and I have obviously talked about the fact that the pedagogy of the liberal arts is as relevant as it's ever been. The branding and the name might not really be ringing true in a lot of ways, right? So I think our biggest problem is just the words don't work for people, but the underpinning of what the education is incredibly valuable. And I think you've given a great entree in thinking about how even in the context of very specific military training, there's incredible value in this notion of being adaptable, agile, right? Critical thinker, even, forcing, the creativity button a little bit more. So give us an idea of how you're starting to, move the institution into a place where professional skills and some of these other things are being woven into the liberal arts. I'm curious how you've been framing it, what kind of resonance you've been hearing around that, and also what kind of resistance you might have heard.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such an important discussion. You mentioned we're a flagship university, right? We're engaged in this broad range of activities. But if you have to boil it down to its essence, ultimately our mission for the state of Montana is to help people achieve a better life. foster inclusive prosperity for our community, advance the reaches of knowledge. I mean, that's what we're here to do. And I think we often get trapped in some, I'll call them unproductive debates. I think over the past decade or so, I think many in the academic world, are perhaps in a bit of a defensive posture. And I think unnecessarily, the growing emphasis on the importance of skills-based training, right? Whether that's boot camps or technical certificates or even employer-provided education, it feels to some, and understandably, like a direct attack on the importance of a liberal arts education. And I think debates too often swirl around of, the question of what do students need from the education. We're structuring it as an either or. Is it skills-based kind of professional education or a broad liberal arts foundation? And I feel like that's a false dichotomy. You and I have discussed this, and I think you stated it well. Students need to be broadly educated and specifically skilled. It's not either or, it's both and. And I've shared that with our campus. I think that a University of Montana education should really be differentiated by the way in which we deliver a rigorous education that very intentionally, not by happenstance, which is the case in many cases, but very intentionally fosters those foundational competencies necessary to succeed as a thoughtful, engaged citizen. And by the way, and the degree to which we provide those work-based experiences and the way in which we ensure career readiness. So, one of the things I've talked about on campus, and I think you and I've talked about it, it's not either or. I've talked about the idea of this power of and. The students who are going to succeed in today's economy are the ones who can write code and who can consider the ethical implications of autonomous vehicles. The ones who can communicate effectively and who can understand data science. In fact, one of the things I have in the outer entryway of my office is a large ampersand. The symbol of and, right? It's not either or, it's and I think the institutions that are to succeed are the ones who really intentionally foster that for our students.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about a couple of things: intentionality, and then the difference between, we do that versus it's core for every student's experience, right? So going back to some of the studies I led when I was at Gallup, right? The good news is a student who has a job or an internship where they're able to apply what they're learning in the classroom, it doubles their odds of being engaged in their work over their lifetime, right? So it's a game changer. Here's the problem: less than a third of all college graduates nailed that one, right? So yeah, and I have lots of universities say, oh yeah, we offer internships. And I say, okay, quantify how many students had them, right? What percent? How many of those internships had any kind of linkage or synergy with the, let's just call it, broader academic experience that they were having, right? Was there a preparatory course, a reflection course? Were there any moments where the faculty member kind of just engaged in a conversation about what you did for work over the summer, or where so that I think is our challenge, right? It's scale. We can scale this. Like I still have skeptics who think you can't scale it. We can definitely scale it because we've seen it. We've seen Northeasterns and the Drexels, and right, like everybody does a co-op, University of Waterloo, like there's ways that we can scale it. What I think it's the intentionality piece, and I'm not saying scale's easy, but it's the intentionality piece that we're really missing, right? To go out and say, this is a goal of ours. We're going to clearly articulate why it's important. Your ampersand in the front lobby of your office is that's an articulation of an intention. And I know it's playing out in a lot of ways. So I think the first conversation you and I had was about one of the articles I wrote in Forbes about triple threat graduates, right? And the idea of this was that these are students who get a bachelor's degree, but in addition, they leave with having had some sort of internship where they applied what they were learning, right? At some point in those 4 years, they worked on a long-term project or multiple that took a semester or more to complete, where they had some sort of longer term engagement and wrestling with something. And then the last one was the idea that they leave with whatever it is, some kind of an industry recognized credential, right? A specific skill. So I know you guys are doing a lot of things around this. Tell us about some of the initiatives that you're rolling out, like where you're most excited about what you're seeing at University of Montana right now.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I wholeheartedly agree. And we're working really on along both axes, right? That we're engaged in a really robust dialogue with a lot of our faculty members within primarily our College of Humanities and Sciences, but across the university. Our general education committees taking a hard look at like, how should we really think about general education? How should we more intentionally provide that liberal arts foundation rather than gen ed being just a set of a distribution requirement? Let's really weave that together into a curriculum that really does provide those foundational competencies. And at the same time, we have launched over the last year an initiative we're calling Elevate You, which is focused on ensuring that every student has the opportunity to have a significant amount of work-based experiences and experiential learning while they're here. We had formerly what was an Office of Career Services and an Office of Academic Enrichment, i.e. otherwise known as Internships. We brought those together into an Office of Experiential Learning and Career Success. And across the colleges, some of our colleges do it really well. Some of our professional schools, our College of Business has a great internship program. We're not as strong in some of those other areas. And so we're working really hard and some great innovations even over the pandemic with micro internships, partnered with a firm called Parker Dewey to provide short-term remote internships, project-based learning that allows a student to build a portfolio of work during their time here. We've partnered with Kaplan on the credit degree program, which allows our students to access a whole suite of industry recognized credentials. So that history major, and I studied history as a graduate student, graduates with those foundational skills. They can research, they can synthesize, they can communicate, they can understand the cultural and historical ends, but they also have the opportunity to get something that an employer recognizes to help them get that foot in the door. And that's so important. And an important point I want to make, especially for institutions like the University of Montana, 40% of our students are first generation college students. And, when we talk about this imperative to ensure career readiness, it's also an equity imperative because frankly, when the institution doesn't intentionally provide those professional opportunities, those networking opportunities, who does that disadvantage? Well, I'll tell you, it does not disadvantage our privileged students, right? The student who can go and get an internship because their dad's on the board at the bank, or their mom's a partner at the law firm, or their uncle works over at the manufacturing facility. Those students do fine, right? But it's that first generation college student who doesn't know how to put together a resume, perhaps, right? Who doesn't know how to access an internship. They're the ones that suffer. And so if we don't do a better job of this in higher ed, we're perhaps perpetuating intergenerational inequality in a way that I think we have to take really seriously.
Yeah. And to your point, right, making it intentional and making sure it's an experience for all students, not just a handful or a percentage, that is part of the equity agenda, right? I mean, it has to be. And, I continue to be amazed that these statistics are true in this day and age, right? But right now, I'll just give you a specific example. 67% of all universities do not have any kind of funds available for students to pursue unpaid or low paid internships. Now, I mean, obviously, a student who can't afford not to be paid over the summer or whatever it is, right? They can't take advantage of these internships. Not only do they have less social capital access in the example you made, but even if they had an internship offer, like if it's an unpaid one, boom, they're out because there's not there, right? To me, in this day and age, right, to go out to, the major gift officers at any university and say, do you think you could raise some money for funds for students who can't afford unpaid and low paid internships? Like that to me seems like a no-brainer. I hope anybody who's listening to this in higher ed right now is literally jotting this down, calling their development officer, figuring out a way to put it into their capital campaign, right? But it's just, I'm glad you brought up the equity imperative around this because it's not just work readiness, right? It's very specifically work readiness for those who need it most and who have been least served by our higher ed institutions and by employers in general, right? Who are relying on higher ed in many ways to fix all kinds of problems, right? Some that we might have an obligation to fix and others that, it's just, that's where higher ed is and that's how they try to serve. So big problems.
I'm glad you brought it up, and that's exactly what we've done. In fact, we just finished a multi-year campaign here at the University of Montana. Frankly, we had a great outcome, exceeded our goals. A campaign that had a goal of $320 million. We upped it to 400, and we landed at 450.
Awesome.
And we just closed it this past fall. And so my question is, okay, we got to keep that momentum going. So we're actually going through and updating our fundraising priorities. And with our development lead, I've said, yes, I want every single college to have as a priority funding for paid internships and in career readiness opportunities. The other piece I'd add to that too, and I think you're seeing some universities do this. Every college within a university has an advisory board, and typically they ask those advisory boards for funds and their advice, of course. But I think it's increasingly important to ask those advisory boards, hey, what about some internships for our students? How can you help this? So it's something I talk about every time I go around the state of Montana. In fact, my wife still makes fun of me because as I first joined the university back in 2018, went over to Billings, Montana, and with one of our great alumni friends, went around various businesses and just, introduction, wanted to say, hey, I'm here at the university, want to see how we can partner effectively. And I asked all of them, like, well, did you have any interns from last semester or last summer? And my wife was like, will you quit asking about that? But it was really frustrating because very few of them had. Right. And then I finally had one that said, yeah, we did have one. And I said, well, okay, who was it? How'd you get it? And it was like, oh, it was Frank's nephew. Frank's on our board, so he came over and it just really hit me. That it's like, wow, this is a big problem we have to solve. We have to be more intentional. We have to generate funds for this. And it's important for those employers too, because they need it, especially smaller employers in a place like Montana. When I worked at GE, every summer we had interns. And a big global company, you've got a whole machinery that brings interns in, from a set of colleges with whom they partner, and they get those roles. You look at an economy like Montana, we're mostly small businesses. If I've got a 10-person firm, I don't know how to build an internship program. And so we have to do a better job of working directly with those employers and often with chambers of commerce, with economic development groups to create cohorts of interns. And we're doing that across the state of Montana, which is really important, but does take resources.
Yeah. Well, look, I even though I know it sounds like your wife is not cool with the idea. I think you got to keep pushing the question with every employer you meet. Do you have an intern? Why not? You want one? Sign up here. Right. Yep. So, and I'm glad you mentioned, because I think this is where a lot of universities get locked into kind of a mindset where they think about the obvious Fortune 500 employer who might be in their town or region, right? Like a big player like GE. Really where the rich opportunities are all the small and medium employers who aren't engaged in this, right? They don't have big functions, right? Where I go back to my example, when I launched a company in the Boston area, we were in Needham, Massachusetts. At the time, I was 11 employees. And so somebody from Northeastern's co-op office reached out to me. We weren't even in the phone book. We were less than a year old. I don't know how they found us, right? But they were like, would you be interested in having a co-op? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I just kind of reluctantly took a 30-minute meeting with this person. They came out, explained the program. I was like, wow, so they're here for 6 months. They're in a paying job. If it doesn't work out, we can send them back and vice versa. I was like, what's the catch? I mean, it was like a no-brainer for a company that was 11 people. And I remember, our first co-op student, Kim Durkin, we ended up hiring her full-time after, but she came on board and I literally said, you are the director of marketing. Why? Because I didn't have a director of marketing. So Kim got a really engaging job because we were a small firm, not because we were a big one, right? And so this is where, obviously, when you talk about Montana, smaller population, you've got small and small businesses all over the place, but every campus, right, needs to think about the small and medium-sized employer partners, not just the big ones, and that's where you can have potentially a more effective internship for the student. And that provides real value to those organizations as well.
I totally agree with you. And I'd add to it, local governments. In fact, just last night, our honors college, we had an award ceremony virtually, and we awarded the mayor of Missoula, Mayor John Engen, with an award. And actually, this was a partnership that created a program called the Quest program, where the mayor was working and engaging our honors students to help address some of the city's most vexing problems. We have a housing shortage, like many communities that are growing, and we have students that go and they're working in the city government, understanding the context of those challenges. And in fact, one of our recent grads is now on the housing board in Missoula as part of this. And so you see this happen. And even, the success stories are great when the hires work out. But I'd also tell you, even when the internship's not great, that's still a valuable learning experience. In fact, I had a year and a half ago, we went and restructured the university's debt. We went to Wall Street and closed a transaction. We took a couple of business students with us, myself and our CFO and a couple others, just so they could see that experience. And I was asking one of the students, a young woman, I said, well, did you do an internship this summer? Of course, my question. And she said, I did. And I said, well, how was it? She said, oh, I hated it. And I said, well, what'd you think of that? And she said, but actually it was great because I thought that's what I wanted to do. Right. And now I know I don't. And now I'm not going to waste 2 years figuring that out and jumping. And it was a great learning experience. So, across the board, big or small, good or bad, they provide important learning opportunities that help our students succeed earlier and to be more effective over the course of their entire career.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, on the subject, I'm glad you brought up, micro internships and Parker Dewey, who I'm a big fan of, right? Like, they were around before the pandemic, but, there has been because we had no choice, right? We moved to online education. Guess what else moved online? Right. If there was an internship, every internship was virtual or it didn't happen. And one of the points I'm hopeful about in terms of a positive outcome of the pandemic is on this point, right? Virtual internships. There is now growing to widespread acceptance of a virtual internship from employers now, right? They're also starting to realize that, we can actually recruit a more diverse group of students into these programs because we're not limited by physical proximity, right? Or if I'm in Washington, D.C., which is a very expensive city to live in, there's a whole bunch of students who just can't afford to live in Washington for the summer to do an internship there, even if there's a great internship, right? So, but to open up the door to virtual internships that can be done from anywhere, you've now essentially just brought tons of internships to Missoula without doing anything physically, right? And so I'm hopeful that there's an equity access opportunity embedded in the growth of virtual internships and the shorter term ones, right? Like the micro internships, you do 4 or 5 of those, you're getting broad experience, you're getting feedback from multiple employers. In some ways, that's like you do one internship with one company, but if you can do 5 little ones with 5 different ones in 5 industries, right?
Right. Absolutely. And you're in, especially in a place like Montana, the distances are far. And we're seeing, this, one of the aspects of this pandemic that remote work is not here to stay for everybody, but it is here to stay for some people. And, and there are a much broader range of opportunities for people within their communities, within their hometowns here in Montana, to live and work in a place they love, near their family, but to also have a rewarding career with perhaps global companies. And so creating those opportunities for our students while they're undergraduates, sets the stage, I think, for that ability. Because we always want here in Montana, it's one of the things I tell our state legislature, we want our students to graduate, to be successful, to stay right here in Montana. And our job is to help not only grow businesses in Montana to provide those opportunities, but also provide opportunities that perhaps are remote for our students as well.
Right. It's been a fun conversation. We got time for like one question. I told you it was going to feel like 11 minutes, not 30, but tell us what one thing is on the horizon for University of Montana that you're most excited about.
Well, I'm really excited about, again, really marrying this idea of broadly educated and specifically skilled. I am very excited about what our faculty are doing, of really thinking intentionally about the ways that we prepare our students to be those thoughtful, engaged citizens, and the innovative ways that we're equipping them with those skills to succeed on day one. I believe so strongly in the value of a liberal arts foundation. As misunderstood as that term is by many, the value of it to me is unquestionable. And how we marry that, I think institutions that do that well are going to be the ones that not only serve their students the best, but succeed over the long run. So I'm really excited about that, and a lot of it's in partnership with you.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to doing great things and watching your success. So, Seth, thank you very much for joining today, and I will look forward to catching up with you at some point soon, I'm sure. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Brandon. Take care.